Alright, so the last time we finished up, we had pulled the power supply and control boards out of two different Apple Hi-Fi docks. One we called the Swamp Box, the other one's the new one, which we haven't even figured out what's supposed to be wrong with it yet. But we're going to use the good one to check the bad one. Let's get into it. So here we've got a couple control boards and a couple power supplies. And the initial problem I had with Swamp Box was I had no power. And that was the customer's complaint too. So initially what we've got is, let's plug this in. This is the way the unit would have been. We're going to plug in the AC and we're going to give it some power. Now we've got juice to this thing, and let's take some voltage measurements. Now we know what our measurements are because we have a cheat sheet. So the second lead should be 3.3, and we've got nothing. Third lead, we've got a small something, but nothing great. This should be our 6 volts. We got 1.6. Okay. So I'll have to admit, I've already done this, but I was stuck because I didn't know the value of that component that's failed. We're going to see it right away. But when the new one came in, I'm able to use it to find our problem. Let's unplug this main board and back up. Let me catch you up. So we're going to turn this on again, and then we're going to probe our same areas. Got our ground here, this black. If I go in this way, we're on this side, so that's the 6 volts. And on the other side of it, we should have 16.7, 17 volts. So this whole thing's kind of upside down, but bear with me. So if I go in my negative there, this should be 3.3. And the other side should be 17. Where are we at? So there's our 17. So now our power supply is working, but it wasn't working when it was connected to this. Let's turn this off. So somewhere on this board, we have a problem. Let's go into ohms mode. Let's actually get a negative on here. Okay. Now you want to make sure that these are actually a negative source. Sometimes they're not always, the ground for the power. So that's our ground. This they're calling a return. Let's go to this first one, which should be either our 3.3 or our 6 volt. Okay, we're in the mega ohms. This side, 100 Ks. This is going to be a ground. This is going to be a ground. And this one should be a power supply line. And we're shorted. So that's a 17. That's our 17 volt line. And we've got pretty low ohms there. And that's the same 17 on this side. Pretty low ohms. So let's use our thermal camera to try and find our problem. Now, like I said, I've already found this, but I wanted to bring you along with it. Okay, we've got this mounted. I've already soldered a wire to our shorted area. Let's bring in our power supply to inject voltage. Okay, so I'm drawing a short. So let's go to the thermal cam. And let's inject voltage. Now some of those spots you're seeing, those are just reflections off the metal cans. and I'm seeing nothing. Let's go to the other side of the board. Okay, I'm going to take the injection off. See that spot going away? Okay, where'd it go? So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to show you. It's this capacitor. I'm going to point out something here. You can really see the fractures in it. But sometimes when you're doing visual inspection, you don't necessarily see this, because when this is shorting, that power supply is shutting off. So it's not really hitting this with any kind of voltage. But when we inject voltage, that's when these really flare up and start showing all the cracks. All right, so the whole question I had with this thing was, what is that value? And because this is a bad capacitor, we're never going to know. But we do have the other board. So let's look at this one. Let's go back to the scope for a second. So there's our good capacitor. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the value of that capacitor. I want to try this once. I'm always curious on how this reads in circuit. I'm thinking it's going to be a 10 microfarad. Now it's in circuit, so I don't know how well this is going to work. 8 microfarad? So it's 10 microfarad. But we're going to double check. Let's go to the scope and move this into position. Didn't quite need that much, but I just like to wet it a bit. Okay, so we've taken it out of circuit and we've just moved it over. So that'll hold it there for us while we check once. So what did we say? It was 8 microfarad? Let me get you back in view. I'm going to go on the capacitor again, and it's 10 microfarad. So let's go back to our other board and remove our bad capacitor and see if that gets rid of our short, which I can guarantee it will. Come on. Let's go back to the scope. There's our bad one. So this guy we can pull out. It's big. So now we should be able to juice this up, and let's pull our jumper wire. Okay, that's what we were using to inject with. Let's plug our supply back in. Now let's give it some power. Let's go again, negative on the center, in between the two leads here. Let's get off of ohms. How about DC? There's our 6 volt. There's a 3.2, 3.3. It should be a 17 line. Another 17 line there. And another 6 or 3.3 there. And this board is now working right so far. Okay, so far we've removed that short. We're going to need to put a 10 microfarad back on there and replace this one back. Okay, so we removed the bad cap. We identified its value from a good board. Now we're going to put the good cap back in place. We're going to replace a cap on the bad board. And then we're going to do a mock setup with the whole unit sort of spread out here. And we're going to plug each one of these in and test each one that it's working fully. Because we do have some other things we've got to deal with, like some bad 30 pins. So like, subscribe. See you next time. Take it easy.